thank you, and thank you to SMU for hosting this great event. I'd also like to do some appreciation for the Canadian Consulate, the Mexican Consulate that are participating, and other folks that are coming on out here. 2026 is going to be a consequential year in North America between the USMCA review and a little fun with the World Cup. I know Monica's getting a little frantic with things coming up here in the summer days, but it's going to be a big event. Let me give a quick plug for the Canada-Texas Chamber of Commerce. I'm the co-director for the DFW region. The chamber was originally founded in Houston. Doug, Tobias, and Jim have been promoting commerce and trade between Canada and Texas for a long, long time. Myself and Alice Fu, my co-director here in the DFW region, who can't be here tonight, are responsible for the DFW activities for the Canada-Texas Chamber. So glad to be here, glad to be a sponsor. So thank you for attending. And if anybody wants to look us up, canada-texas.com, or find me afterwards, and we'll make sure we get connected. Thank you very much.
So now we're going to start with our formal program. But before we, again, feel that it was important to have some setting remarks for, we have one Consul General joining us in a panel, but we have another fantastic Consul General who represents, I am a Texican, Texas, Mexico. And so Consul General for one of my home countries, for Mexico, Consul General Luis Rodríguez Bucio is going to set some remarks and join us in stage. Come on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank to all the authorities of SMU, especially to the Mission Foods Texas-Mexico Center, the Tower Center, and the Bridwell Institute for organizing this important event in collaboration with the Canada-Texas Chamber of Commerce and the North American Strategy for Competitiveness Network. Let me begin by recalling the motto that best describes the relationship between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. North America is one of the most competitive regions in the world. Without doubt, our region's economy is among the most integrated globally, thanks to the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Likewise, the North American Leaders Summit, NALS, has become a key mechanism to high-level political dialogue where the three countries establish shared priorities and objectives across multiple areas. Both mechanisms clearly demonstrate the level of understanding among our nations and how we leverage diplomacy to address the current challenges of the international order. The USMCA and the NALS help us to advance not only the national interests of each country, but also those of the region as a whole. Beyond institutionalized mechanisms, our region is deeply honored and proud to host the FIFA World Cup 2026. This tournament serves as a unique platform for soft power by projecting a shared narrative of North America as a modern, open, and highly integrated region. It also reinforces existing economic interdependence, but also translates it into symbolic capital, international trust, investment attraction, and strengthen joint global positioning. At the international level, hosting the FIFA World Cup enhances the perspective of Mexico, United States, and Canada as strategic partners capable of coordinating a global-scale event under high standard of infrastructure, security, and innovation. For our societies, the benefits are tangible. economic dynamism, urban and infrastructure development, as well as social cohesion and shared pride, elements that go well beyond the realm of sports. By strengthening our economic integration, fostering innovation, and ensuring that diplomacy is the right approach to continue projecting stability and common understanding, we can position our region to lead in an increasingly complex and competitive global landscape. Ultimately, the strength of North America lies in our ability to act together with purpose and vision. At the final whistle, Mexico, US, and Canada will be championing North America and lifting the trophy for their hospitality and unity. In doing so, we are not only reinforcing our regional ties, but also contributing to a more stable and prosperous international order. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Consul General. Okay, y'all, now to the meat of the program. In my instructions to say to invite everybody to sit down, but they are they're already sat down. So we save a minute. But I'm actually, everybody has a little blue hand up. There's QR codes in the back where you can also read the incredible bios of each of our speakers. But I have the distinct pleasure to introduce our moderator, Doug McCullough, who is the co-president of the Canada-Texas Chamber, will be leading this conversation and telling you a little bit more about our distinguished panel. But again, I want to thank him because he was part of the brain trust that thought about this program, and we're so glad to have this new partnership. So Doug, I'm going to leave it in your very capable hands, and I'll let you kick it off.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. First, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel. In the center of our panel is Consul General Susan Harper, Consulate of Canada. To my immediate left, Raymond Robertson, Senior Fellow, SMU Mission Foods Texas Mexico Center, and Director of the Mosbacher Institute for Trade, Economics, and Public Policy at Texas A&M. I mean, it seems like a conflict, but that's just me. And to my left, Andrew Lawson Carranco, Legislative Affairs Chair, Laredo Chamber of Commerce. Again, thank you all for being here. Well, to kick us off, I want to turn to, sorry. To kick things off, I want to turn first to the Consul General. We're going to get into some of the statistics and so forth down the road, but want to let you sort of set the table, if you will, to talk about a little bit about the history of the USMCA and its predecessor, NAFTA.
Well, quickly, from a Canadian point of view, this started actually in the 60s with the Auto Pact. And we found that Canada and the US working together found that they could produce more cost-competitive vehicles and also more technologically advanced working together. And so we graduated from that probably after 100 years of discussions, because the US is 10 times our size, to proceed with the Canada-US FTA. And that was because our companies saw the writing on the wall. This is where globalization was going to go, and it was sooner or later that our companies were going to have to step up and become globally competitive. So we had the Canada-US FTA. It was a huge negotiation. We wiped our brows, and then the US said, Mexico. So we said, not without us. So then we said, it's not going to serve us if we go into a hub and spoke. It's going to help us if we have a web, so the three of us can build together. And that's how we got. 1989 was the Canada-US FTA, 1994 NAFTA. And that's when we really saw things happening, where Mexico became much more integrated with us as a partner, obviously geographically And economically, that was already happening in the US. But for us, that was a real advance in our regional relationship. And the NAFTA, we thought, yes, very good job of increasing jobs and prosperity for each country involved, because fundamentally, trade is not a zero-sum game. We all benefited. Now, that doesn't mean that every sector and every individual benefited, and that led to some need for changes. And as the world evolves, some of the things that we deal with now weren't even invented when we had the NAFTA. So in the first Trump administration, there was a desire to really modernize the NAFTA. So we went back to the negotiation table and integrated some new labor, environmental, and digital elements that just were not possible at the time of the NAFTA. And from our point of view, it continues to be a very useful agreement. We like that it gives stability and trade rules, because that's what business tells us they need. They need stability so they can get on with things. But at the same time, we want something that's looking to the future and resilient. So for our point of view, the fact that we have a review now reflects that desire to be a strong, stable agreement, but resilient and looking to the future. So that's how we got to here on July 1st.
Well, you mentioned that trade's not a zero-sum game, and we sort of hear that type of concept in the current political discussions. But also a famous person from Dallas made a comment back during the discussions of the negotiations for NAFTA the first time. Ross Perot made a comment about that there would be a giant sucking sound with all the jobs leaving the United States. Was there a giant sucking sound? What was the history, the economic results of NAFTA?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you to the organizers and thank you for moderating tonight. I wanted to especially thank the Tower Center and the SMU Mission Foods Texas-Mexico Center, which has been an honor for me to participate in, because I believe that the Texas-Mexico relationship is one of the most important in the world. And I'm going to answer your question, but I want to have a little bit of background just first, which is if you look at any country pair in the world, Germany, France, Russia, Italy, whatever, there's no country pair besides the United States and Mexico that has more migration flows between them. And there's now no country pair that has more trade than the United States and Canada, the United States and Mexico, even now surpassing China. And why is that important? The reason why that's important is because where does our well-being come from? How do we measure wealth? It comes from transactions. It comes from the ability to do trades with other people that have things that you don't. So trade itself generates wealth, and the exchanges we have with Canada, the exchanges Mexico and Canada have, the exchanges we have with Mexico, generate wealth for us. So what happened with the NAFTA was two things. Number one is it opened up the opportunity for kind of a rationalization and an increase in efficiency and the integration of global supply chains, which emerged as the dominant paradigm for world trade. This actually, and I've heard people say this, this in a sense saved the U.S. automobile industry by allowing them to get cheaper parts from Mexico, get parts from Canada, and vice versa. Parts are going back and forth that allowed American workers in particular, but also Canadian and Mexican workers, to become more productive and therefore produce more cars and still maintain the industry itself. Now, having said that, with the giant sucking sound, I think it's very important, as you pointed out, is that everybody hates change. Change is hard. And there was a reallocation across some industries, and there were some towns that weren't able to adjust very well. And I think what we've learned now is that our failure to take care of those people that didn't benefit or the people that lost generated a huge amount of resentment and anger against trade itself. And so because those people were very vocal, it's generated sort of a sense of suspicion against trade. And what I'm trying to do, and what I think many of us are trying to do, is help people understand that trade is not zero-sum. I think that's absolutely clear, but it's very important as a matter of public policy that we do take care of those people that have lost out in order to make sure we protect the gains that generate wealth for all three countries.
I want to talk a little bit about just how integrated the economies are. And Andrew, you haven't had a chance to talk yet, so I'll turn it to you. To talk a little bit about what you see in Laredo, just how integrated the economies are.
Well, when you go down to Laredo, you see how integrated our economies are. You kind of realize that there is no real separate economy. Down in Laredo, we see 20,000 trucks cross our bridge every day. That is a lot of trucks. You see what work goes in there. We have, for example, let's talk about integrated economies. The truckers that come across the United States are on a visa. Most of them are Mexican truckers. I can't get visas right now for Mexican truckers because they can't pass an English exam. Now, they can tell you how you can pass. Do you know what's inside your truck? Yes, they can answer that. How much does that weigh? Yes, they can answer that. But can they talk Shakespeare? Yeah, they probably can't. And now these interviews are being done in English in Mexico, in a city and a town where we all speak Spanish. I speak more English or Spanish on a daily basis in Laredo than I do English. Well, that comes out to about one trucker a day who can't get their visa. That comes up to about 30 truckers a week, 30 truckers a month that I lose. That's been going on for 6 months. That means that is 30 truckers a month that I can't get to cross those things. That has a real impact, not just on our local economy, but our national economy when it comes to efficiencies. And that's kind of what you find out on the border, is that when you look at the integration of the economy, it's not so much these big things. Yeah, you want to get, I think the Toyota Tundra truck seat will cross in between 7 and 9 times before it's completed. That's a big thing. But look at the little things on the border. Look how those small steps lead to a national impact. The border and the integration of the border economy is not an integration, it is just a solid one economy.
So you mentioned sort of the disruption and how that affected communities at the time. If there were disruption to trade, how much would that affect communities and workers? I mean, because I know in the first Trump administration there was at least a brief, closing of the border to trucks. Talk a little bit about just how dependent local communities and workers are on the current trade flows. Go for it.
Sure. So one thing that we say in the trade community is that if we were to shut down, say, the U.S.-Mexico border, and similar, I'm sure, with the Canadian border, is that there would be a recession in the United States in 6 days. And the reason why is because automobile plants can't get their parts. They don't have the inventories that you would expect. If you can't get the parts, you don't need the workers. And if you don't need the workers, you can lay off the workers, and then they don't go to the grocery store. They're not buying things, and it causes entire communities to ripple down in a downward spiral. So the fact that we're so closely integrated is actually critical to keeping the economy humming. And these types of barriers that you're mentioning with the visas and the tariffs and other types of things are throwing sand into the gears of one of the most well-oiled machines in the world. I mean, Mexico and Canada are the best in the world at logistics. They're able to get these supply chains humming at an incredibly rapid rate that generates gains for all of us. And these types of barriers are causing that to slow down and be clogged up, and that's going to have an effect on employment, not just starting at the border, and it's going to ripple all the way north.
But I don't know if people really understand how trade works, like the day-to-day things. I think COVID taught us that, hey, if I get an Amazon package, there's a warehouse somewhere that gets the package from the local warehouse to my doorstep. But for example, if you have avocados in Mexico, you want to bring them up here, who really thinks or even cares about the fact that I need to have a specialized pallet that's heat treated or has pesticides on it that can cross the border without issue? We don't think about those sort of things because we have conditioned the public to really realize the complexity of trade on the border.
I want to, just to keep things moving along, let's turn to USMCA. Now, I recently hosted a panel with a gentleman named Goldie Hyder from the Canadian Business Council. And I used the expression renegotiation of the USMCA. He did not like that one bit. And his theme over and over again was, we're not having renegotiation, we're extending this. And so I'll start with you, Susan. Talk a little bit about the Canadian perspective of, hopefully it's not a renegotiation, but what are some of the issues you think are going to be live issues? And just talk a little bit about how important it is from a Canadian perspective in particular that the USMCA is continued.
Well, as I said, I think we recognize that there's a balance to be struck between continuing to modernize agreements and yet to give business stability. And in fact, when the first tariffs came through, to our great surprise as Canadians, what we did in the consulate, we went to the people in the 5 states that we cover who were involved in supply chains and said, so how is this having an impact on you? And it's probably not a surprise to you here in Texas, not everybody was thinking first about Canada, because there was a lot going on. But those who were dealing with Canada certainly said this is a valuable relationship for us, and yes, we are having difficulties. Number one, because this is quite a bit more than we were paying. The objective in the Canada-US FTA and the NAFTA and the USMCA was to reduce tariffs so we were more globally competitive. So all of a sudden to be dealing with tariffs, but then it was the volatility, whether they were dealing with Canadians or not, whether they were dealing with Mexicans or not. It was the volatility that was really difficult for companies. So for us, when we look at the USMCA, that's why we thought a review, that makes sense. And I had worked on this in headquarters. There were working groups. We can do things on the margins of agreements without reopening. And we were committed to not going to a reopening because in a globally competitive world like the one we're in, we need to think about what structure does business need. And that's repeatedly what we heard from our American supply chain members, from the Canadian companies who were here, from the Mexican companies we were talking to, from the chambers we were talking to. Volatility is the biggest issue they were dealing with. Certainty is what they wanted. So from our point of view, we want to meet our obligation of a review. The deadline is July 1st, but I don't think anybody thinks it's one day to the next. That's Canada Day, by the way, so I'm not sure if that was just a coincidence. But we are very glad to do the review. We're ready to do the review, and in fact, I think there's been a lot of attention given to the fact that there are conversations going on between USTR and Mexico. Well, there are conversations going on between Canada and the US as well. I know I was just in Washington actually till this morning, and our chief negotiator, Janice Charette, was in Washington at the beginning of the week. We're having conversations, and frankly, Canada and Mexico are having conversations too. We value the bilateral and the trilateral relationship with both of our partners, but we think that it is in everyone's interest to keep the stability and just look at the resilience, look at the adaptations we need to make now.
I'll pose the same question to the two of you. Are there any, whether it's from a U.S. perspective, Mexico's perspective, or even very much a Texas-specific perspective, issues that you think will be addressed or that you would like to be addressed? And I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, my understanding is that there's a lot of optimism that we're going to still have a USMCA. I mean, I think the first time we renegotiated it, that wasn't quite as clear, so I think that's on the positive side. I think two of the concerns that have come up is that I think people are now leaning towards understanding that there's going to be probably annual review. I don't know kind of where exactly. I know it's not what we're excited about, but people are talking about that. And I know that the Canadians in particular, I've heard, are also not very happy about the idea that we're probably going to end up with some tariffs that are going to remain even after this extension is done. And so those are things I think that we need to think about, and I think you need to talk to your legislators about that, because those are not things that we would prefer. You can't get rid of the uncertainty if you're going to have annual review. That's right. You just can't. So we want to try and not have that, and we obviously would like to not have tariffs. And so if you can call people when you get home, those would be two things I think that you'd want to really spread the word about.
Yeah, I want to answer your question, but what's interesting is it's kind of a double-edged sword, the review. It's you think about it, we had NAFTA for 20 years, and we never touched NAFTA once, which is probably a tremendous success in its own right, but I mean, a review is kind of a nice thing. The question is, back to the stability, do you really have, who's going to be the president of all three countries at that moment? Are they going to be pro-trade? Are they going to be suspicious of trade? I, for one, I hope that Canada has a better relationship with Mexico. I was very happy to see that large delegation go to Mexico City. And the reason for that is that trade's going to come through Laredo. So that's good for our warehouses down there and our stability. Really, on the USMCA, I think for Texas, we want to be able to continue it the way it is right now. There is a section there on competitiveness, and that's what NASCO is all about. We want to focus on that Chapter 26 competitiveness clause, because that really gives us a good foot to stand on against people who would be what the administration may call trade adversaries, but people who we would compete with, whether it's in the Far East or in Europe. And that's really something we can use and utilize.
Well, just to add on the issues you're talking about, everybody, I think, has heard about dairy products from Canada. And it's true. Canada likes to take care of its dairy farmers. It's a bit of a complex situation. We have a quota inside which we have a low tariff. And if you go over that, it's a very high tariff. We don't export those products. But actually, we haven't even met the quota yet. So we're not charging that huge amount to our partners. But it is true that agriculture is one of the most sensitive subjects any trade agreement gets into. And we have dairy, and you have corn, and you have sugar, and you have tobacco. We all know that agriculture, it's more than a sector. It's a way of life. It's feeding our own people. And what did we learn during COVID? The importance of having not just cost competitive and technologically competitive supply chains, but supply chains we could count on. We all got that in COVID. So we believe that this regional free trade agreement has shown that we have that kind of friendshoring going on, where we can count on our partners. That's what people need. And there were very few items that had tariffs on them. I think, there are many people who feel that some tariffs are inevitable, but frankly, what is a tariff? A tariff is a tax. And who's going to pay that tax? It's going to hit kitchen tables. And that's when most people are going to pay attention, because most of us are busy doing other things most of the day. But when it hits the food, the rent, car for your kids, that's when people all of a sudden are going to be paying attention. And that's where tariffs go.
All right, turning to the theme we talked about was the soft diplomacy. One of you and I were just in Houston at a very large energy event. And frankly, among the Canadians I spoke with, there was a real difference in attitude and perspective, and we now have not only the Carney government, but a Carney majority government. And in the spirit of sort of soft diplomacy and how much energy can play into regional security, talk about a little bit about that briefly. Just in this, we have so much news right now out of the Straits of Hormuz and what's happening with energy prices. Talk a little bit about Canada's role in energy security.
Well, it's certainly true that Canada is a huge supplier of energy. 9 of our 10 provinces export energy in one form or another. We supply 25% of the crude oil that is refined in the United States. Total, 25% of the crude oil in the United States comes from Canada. And the refineries in the Midwest and in the Rockies, they are built for Canadian crude oil, which actually the U.S. gets at a discount, but it's very useful for jet fuel and certain uses. But that's what those refineries are built to handle. We are 60% of the imported oil that the U.S. has. Now, we all know that the energy situation is evolving, and Texas, like all of the states here, very big in oil and gas and renewables, because we're all looking at, heat, cold, data centers, maybe some of these advanced manufacturing. I was just in D.C. with people from Oklahoma who were talking about a big aluminum plant. I thought, gee, is that where you want to put your energy, into a big aluminum plant? But that's what countries can make those decisions. But energy is so fundamental to both economic and national security, and we are a huge partner. And that's electricity in New England. We do it all over the States. And that's an important part of what we're talking about, is not only is this economic security, this is national security. You cannot have cross-border trade without cross-border security. That's why we now have law enforcement working out of our office, because we know that that's part of the real world here in the region, and so we are working on that. But all of these issues feed in. It's not just a commercial transaction, it's also an awful lot of investment. And that's another whole issue, because trade, we say trade, but sometimes we forget that's investment by greenfield companies, or investment through our huge pension plans, and then partnerships, SMU, UTD, some of the others where there's great research going on. That's where we're also working together on new technology, because global competitiveness isn't just about cost, it's about staying at the forefront. And frankly, we think Mexico and Canada have a lot to offer the US and vice versa. And that's where we think we need to go, is that with that attitude that we are partners, we are allies. And that's where the soft diplomacy comes in.
All right. Well, thank you all for being on the panel.
For a couple of questions from the public, and I should turn on the microphone. So we have a couple minutes for questions from the public, a couple of minutes, if you guys will indulge us. So there are microphones, and there are incredible young people, our amazing students. So if you raise your hand, we're going to take just 2 questions before we transition to the next conversation. See the gentleman over there.
You've said so much that my mind is just sort of reeling right now with questions and thoughts. I should preface this by saying I am a globalist, and I very much believe in the idea of a global economy. And I'm upset by all that's happened. With regime change in the future, do you think it's possible to get back to a more smooth interdependency, not just with Mexico and with Canada, but in general for America?
I bet you're asking me that question.
Is the damage done? Is what I'm asking.
I'm not a big Back to the Future fan, I will admit. I don't think we will go back to where we were. I don't think that's possible. Frankly, trust has been broken, and that's very difficult to overcome. But I also think the U.S. is going to continue to be the biggest market in the world. We are by far, well, not by far, a little bit over Mexico, the biggest market for U.S. goods. We are a market that's more than Japan, plus Germany, plus France, plus the UK, with 250 million people. Our 40 million buy more American products. So, and Mexico is very close to us in this. So it's hard to see that breaking completely. And the other thing is, neither of us are going to be moving out of the neighborhood. So I think we're going to find a solution, and I'm half American, I will admit it. I have a lot of faith in Americans to help us get to the right place. But it won't be where we were, for better or for worse.
Tocqueville says that Americans have a natural disposition to moderation, so we can pray that it happens. And I'm going to echo your sentiments, because if you look at the investment that's happened in Mexico for manufacturing, especially in the last 5 years since COVID, that sort of investment is not easy to move out. We've talked about reshoring, and I'm not quite sure if it's reshoring as much as more investment being reinvestment into Mexico. You're not seeing new factories open up in the Far East nearly as often. A lot of those profits are being moved to Mexico. I've heard an article from a friend of mine who said that there was no such thing as reshoring, the reshoring myth. It has happened, it is there, except they're not closing factories in Asia. What they're doing is they're moving those profits, investing into Mexico, and that's going to take 20 years to get that moved back somewhere else.
And we're going to allow one more question. not, if nobody's really done, we'll move to the next panel. Well, thank you so much, this panel. Appreciate it.